River Rouge factory that he built. It was so big that if you started at one edge and walked to the other, it would take you all day to get from one end of the factory to the other. The Ford Motor Company was so mechanized and so carefully constructed that they had their own sheep, tended by Ford shepherds, who created Ford wool to be woven into Ford fabric to put on the seats of the Ford Model T. And deep in the fabric of how you build a company that's successful is this idea of the org chart. One or a few people on top who are the ones who are creative, who are the ones that get the good parking spaces, ordering lots and lots and lots of people to do their bidding. And we bought into this completely because we got stuff. In exchange for doing people's bidding, we got stuff. This is the work of an artist named Peter Menzel. He gets people to take all the stuff out of their house and put it in their front yard, and then he takes their picture. So that's the deal, and it made us all rich. You can't understand how big a shift it was. We went from having to work 2 weeks to get 10 minutes worth of light to having to work 1 minute to get 2 hours worth of light. We went from anyone who wasn't born rich to being sure that they were going to die rich, right? Die poor. That this idea that you had a shot at stuff was compelling, but there was a bargain. And the bargain was, in addition to interchangeable parts, which is what we built factories around, we needed interchangeable people. That they're not going to shut down the Trader Joe's because Blanche on Register 3 doesn't show up. They just slot someone else into where she's supposed to work. That when Frank Lloyd Wright built the Johnson Wax building, this is the secretarial pool. Far removed from the people at the top of the chart who are ostensibly making the important decisions, that what we have here are interchangeable people who are doing what they're told, cogs in the system. So let's try a little experiment, if you would. Raise your right hand just as high as you can. Thank you. Now raise it a little higher. What's that about? It's not that you're bad at following instructions, it's that you're good at following instructions. And that one of the things that you learned when you were 3 and 5 and 7, one of the things you learned from coaches and mentors and bosses is that if you give everything, then when they ask for more, you'll be stuck. So you better hold back a little in reserve. You better not run as fast as you can or lean into it as much as you can, because that is going to get you stuck. We all grew up, every person in this room, in an industrialist world. Now I need to make it really clear that there's a big difference between capitalism and industrialism. Capitalism is using money and resources to take risks. And capitalism was the order of the day in the 1800s. But industrialism hates taking risks. Industrialism is about perfecting and polishing and reorganizing and figuring out how to do whatever you need to alter the government and do whatever you need to alter the population so you can make your stock price go up a little bit more. So when Coca-Cola pushes for the 64-ounce and the 128-ounce soda, right, fighting against regulation, they're doing it because it is okay, it is an acceptable side effect to have an obese population if you can polish the consumption cycle that much more to sell that many more ounces of what you're making. And a whole bunch of things have happened just recently, but basically it comes down to this. Just because you're winning a game doesn't mean you need to keep playing it. And what we are facing right now is the end of industrialism as we know it. That the growth of industrialism, the engine of wealth, is slowing. And in some places, like Detroit, it is completely stopped. And there's a whole bunch of reasons, and I'm going to talk about some of them. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? So I interject with a little bit of a joke, and I can tell in advance that it's a joke, so that way when I get to the end of it, you'll know it's a joke. Lady goes to a psychiatrist and she says, "Doctor, doctor, help." My husband thinks he's a chicken. Doctor says, "Well, I might be able to help. How long has this been going on?" She says, 3 months. 3 months? Why did you wait so long? We needed the eggs. We have a lot of eggs, right? But there's been a price to pay. And we've been paying the price for so long, and it's built so deep into school and into parenting and in the pursuit of the famous college and the ostensibly good job and the meetings we all go to and the things we report to each other about when we're doing well or not, that now that we're not getting so many eggs, I think it's worth taking a minute to think about what that entails. So, that said, I want to talk about revolutions. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these before. This is a record album. Every industry that's around, industry, industrialism, every industry that's around is around because it's perfect. So I'll pick one as an example. If you had a record in 1972, you liked it a lot, it would wear out, you'd have to buy another one. Or if I loaned it to you, I wouldn't have it anymore, and I'd have to buy another one. If I went to buy another one, I'd have to go in my car to a store. And that store wasn't paid for by the record industry. It was filled with lots and lots of these, so I would buy more than one. And on my way home, I would turn on the radio. This is frequencies we should own. And all the radio did was promote that product. The industry didn't have to pay for it. They're not even allowed. And then I'd check my mailbox. There'd be Rolling Stone magazine. A magazine about this industry that it didn't have to pay for to promote this product. And the senior prom and MTV and on and on and on. It was perfect. And then we all know what happened, right? It took less than 5 years for it to go from perfect to impossible. That suddenly, every record ever recorded is available to everyone who has any device for free anytime they want. There's more music performed by more people, listened to more often than ever before, but the music industry is dead. It's just dead. Now, the industrialists in the music business, these are the guys in the suits with the limos and the coats who never cared about the music. They hate this. They're yelling about it, and they'll sue you if they can. But the industry is over, and it's replaced by something impossible. It's impossible that there's all these people making great music in a totally different way. That's what revolutions do. They destroy the perfect, what you used to do, and they enable the impossible. Last week I was in Quebec City, which is one of the coldest places I have ever been in my life. Just warning you there. And I saw Montmorency Falls, which is bigger than Niagara Falls. And it was the first hydroelectric plant in the world. They electrified it. I want you to understand how chaotic the world was shortly before you were born. They electrified it, they ran a line to Quebec City, suddenly there was electricity. What should they do with the electricity? They built a sawmill so that they could take the log coming down the St. Lawrence Seaway. But England put in a tariff against logs, so instantly the sawmill was useless, and so they built a cotton factory. And the cotton factory worked great until one day the demand went down and it burned down and it went away. And so what we see in the history of the industrial era is one thing being replaced by another. This total chaos. And it's only just now that we are spoiled enough to think that it's supposed to stay the way it was. It's not. It's always been noisy until recently. And now it's going to get even noisier as the industrial age ends. And so you're going to have to decide how you want to deal with it. I left that one on longer because I want to make sure that you have enough time to keep up with me. There's a building at Harvard called Croft Hall. And it's where they invented most of the pieces required to make radio work in the early 1900s. It's the physics building. And I was walking there, I was visiting someone, I was walking there, and right next to it they built a new physics building. And Croft Hall is sort of half empty. Turns out that all the physicists at Harvard were not very good at cleaning up after themselves. So they started piling up all the used microwave dishes and wires and things until all the windows were completely covered with this leftover physics stuff. And programmers have stolen that phrase and adopted the word cruft. And what cruft is the code that's left over that doesn't do anything anymore. And cleaning out the cruft is essential if you want to write clean code. And what I wrote this book for is to help us clean out the cruft. There are a whole bunch of assumptions that industrialists have sold us, that we've been brainwashed by, that just aren't true. They used to be true, maybe a little, but the universal ones were never true. But we bought them anyway because it made us rich. One of those ideas is this notion that some people are destined to be followers. That if you look in nature, there's a long history and a long line of creatures that all they do is follow what came before. And yet you go to Grand Central Station, and if you stand there for a couple minutes and watch, what you'll notice is no one is in charge, and no one bumps into anybody else. And it's like Grand Central Station in there, and no one bumps into anybody else. We are really good at leading ourselves if we choose.